The silence in the grand house was a living entity, thick and suffocating. It clung to the polished marble floors and the cold, minimalist furniture that Richard had chosen. For years, Eleanor had moved through that silence, a ghost in her own home, her footsteps muffled by the feeling that she was constantly in the way. But tonight, the silence had been broken by the ugly splintering of words, and now it had returned with a vengeance, heavy with things that could never be unsaid. "It's over, Richard," she had whispered, the words tasting foreign on her tongue. He hadn't even looked up from the financial reports spread across his glass desk. His office, like the rest of the house, was a shrine to his success, a testament to his meticulous, controlled world. "Don't be so dramatic, Eleanor. You're just tired. Go to bed." "No," she said, and the strength in her own voice surprised her. "I'm not tired. I'm done." That finally got his attention. He looked at her then, his gaze sweeping over her as if she were a miscalculation on a balance sheet. He saw her simple dress, the way she nervously twisted the strap of the single bag she had packed, and the defiant set of her jaw. In the doorway behind her, their 7-year-old son, Leo, stood silently, his small hand clutching his favorite worn teddy bear, his eyes wide and fearful. Richard stood up, his expensive suit uncreased, his posture perfect. He was a pillar of the community, a financial genius who managed the wealth of the city's most powerful people. He was admired, respected, and feared. At home, he was just cold. "You're leaving?" He let out a short, humorless laugh. "And going where exactly? What will you do? You have no skills, no money of your own. You've spent the last decade planning charity galas and arranging my dinner parties." He gestured around the sterile, beautiful room. "This is your life, a life I gave you." Each word was a carefully aimed dart, designed to find its mark in her deepest insecurities. But the target was already numb. She had absorbed so much of his quiet disdain over the years that it had formed a protective shell. She simply shook her head and walked towards Leo, kneeling to look him in the eye. "It's time to go, sweetie. It's going to be an adventure." Leo nodded, his bottom lip trembling as he glanced back at his father. As Eleanor stood and took Leo's hand, Richard's voice sliced through the air, colder and sharper than ever before. "Fine, go. Run away and play the martyr. But don't come crawling back when you fail. And you will fail." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss meant only for her. "You're useless, just like your mom." The words struck a place that wasn't numb. They pierced the shell and hit the raw, grieving heart of the girl who had lost her mother too young. Her mother, a kind, gentle artist who had struggled but had filled their tiny apartment with love and color, had been anything but useless. For a moment, Eleanor's vision blurred with tears. She wanted to scream, to throw one of the ridiculously expensive sculptures from its pedestal, to shatter the perfect order of his world. Instead, she squeezed Leo's hand. This was why she was leaving. Not for herself, but for him, so he would never learn to speak to someone he loved this way. So he would never believe that a person's worth was measured in dollars and status. Her eyes scanned the room one last time, a final farewell to a life that had been a gilded cage. They landed on a bookshelf filled with leather-bound classics and financial tomes. On the third shelf, tucked between an antique edition of Moby Dick and a book on global economics, was a worn, dark leather ledger. Richard had told her it was his grandfather's, a sentimental keepsake. She'd always been drawn to its soft, aged cover and the faded etching of a bird on its spine. Sometimes when the loneliness was too much, she would take it down and press flowers between its thick, empty pages, a small, secret act of rebellion, adding a touch of her mother's soul to this sterile place. For a fleeting second, she considered taking it. It was the only object in the house that held any warmth for her. But she stopped. No. It was part of his world, a relic of a life built on secrets and cold transactions. She would take nothing that belonged to him. Turning her back on the book, on the house, on the man who was now a stranger to her, Eleanor walked out the front door and didn't look back. She left behind the life he had given her, and with it, the one thing that would eventually end his career. Their new life was a baptism by sensory immersion, a world away from the silent, scentless tomb of the mansion. It was a tiny 2-bedroom apartment above a bustling Italian bakery in a part of the city Eleanor had only ever driven through with the windows up. The air was thick with the comforting, almost constant aroma of warm bread, garlic, and cinnamon, a stark contrast to the sterile, filtered air in Richard's house. Their furniture, a motley collection from secondhand stores and curbside treasures, was mismatched and bore the dings and scratches of previous lives. Yet every piece, the wobbly kitchen table, the floral sofa with a spring that poked you if you sat just so, the bookshelf made from painted crates, seemed to have more character and warmth than any of Richard's curated, untouchable art pieces. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt like she could breathe. She found a job at the local library, a quiet haven of stories and knowledge tucked between a laundromat and a hardware store. The pay was a pittance, barely enough to cover their modest rent and utilities, but it was hers. She earned it shelving books, helping patrons find information, and running the weekly children's story hour. The simple, profound joy she felt when a child's face lit up at the turn of a page was a feeling she'd never found in the hollow satisfaction of a perfectly executed dinner party. Each dollar she deposited was a small victory, a quiet declaration of her own capability. She learned to budget with a fierceness she didn't know she possessed, to turn simple ingredients into hearty meals, and to find endless joy in things that cost nothing at all. A walk in the sprawling city park, a story read aloud in a makeshift pillow fort, the sound of Leo's laughter echoing in their small, sunlit living room. Leo, after a few weeks of quiet adjustment, began to blossom in a way that stunned her. The fear in his eyes, a constant shadow in his father's house, was replaced by a curious, mischievous sparkle. He made friends with the baker's son, a boisterous, kind-hearted boy named Sam. Eleanor would often come home from the library to find them in the alley behind the bakery, their hands and clothes smudged with dirt and chalk, creating elaborate imaginary worlds. One afternoon, she found them sitting in a large cardboard box they had painted silver. "It's a rocket ship, Mom!" Leo shouted, his voice ringing with an excitement she hadn't heard in years. "We're going to the moon to fight the space pirates!" Sam's father, Mr. Rossi, a stout man with a flour-dusted apron and a booming laugh, would often call up to their window, offering them day-old pastries or a warm loaf of bread. This small community, this network of simple kindnesses, was a balm to Eleanor's soul. It was everything her old life was not. Then, one afternoon, about 4 months after they had left, a letter arrived. It was instantly recognizable as a dispatch from her former life. The envelope was made of thick, creamy cardstock, her name and address typed in a severe, formal font. It was from Richard's lawyer, a man whose smile never reached his cold eyes. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at it. It felt less like a piece of mail and more like a summons. With trembling hands, she sat at her wobbly kitchen table and slid a butter knife under the seal. The document inside was just as imposing. It was a formal settlement offer. Richard was offering her a one-time payment. The number had so many zeros it made her feel dizzy, a sum that seemed astronomical to her now. It was enough to buy a small house, to never have to worry about the rent or an unexpected doctor's visit, to give Leo anything he wanted. In exchange, she would sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, a gag order. He wanted to officially and silently erase her and their decade together from his life. The legalese was dense and suffocating, but the message was clear. Take the money and disappear. There was a clause about parental rights, stating he would not contest her full custody of Leo, a son he hadn't called or asked about once, provided she never made any further financial or personal claims. She read the document over and over. The tired, scared part of her screamed to sign it. It was a lifeline. It was security. It was a way out of the constant, low-level hum of anxiety about money. She could fix the leaky faucet in the bathroom, buy Leo a new winter coat without checking her bank balance 3 times, maybe even take a course, build a new skill. But as she looked at the signature line, she saw Richard's invisible hand, still trying to control her, to manage her, to put a price on her silence and her freedom. This wasn't an act of generosity. It was a business transaction. He wasn't doing this for her or for Leo. He was mitigating a risk. He was sweeping them away like a messy inconvenience that might tarnish his pristine public image. The memory of his last words to her, his voice a venomous hiss, echoed in her mind. "You're useless, just like your mom." Her mother, who had painted canvases that exploded with color and emotion, who had sung off-key while she cooked, who had taught Eleanor that love was the only currency that mattered. Useless? No. Her mother had been rich in ways Richard could never comprehend. Signing this document would be an admission that he was right. It would be conceding that she couldn't make it on her own, that she needed his money to survive. It would be selling her newfound, hard-won self-respect for a life of quiet, comfortable shame. With a surge of adrenaline-fueled determination, she stood up. She took the thick, expensive pages in her hands and ripped them in half. The sound of the tearing paper was a gunshot in the quiet apartment. She ripped them again and again, until the pieces were too small to ever be reassembled. She let them fall from her fingers like bitter confetti into the trash can. It was a reckless, terrifying, and profoundly liberating act. It was the most honest decision she had made in her life. That night, as she tucked Leo into bed, he looked up at her, his expression serious. "Mom," he asked, "is Dad ever going to come visit us?" Eleanor's heart ached. She smoothed the hair back from his forehead. "I don't think so, sweetie. His world is very different from ours now." "Is he mad at us?" "He's mad at the situation," she said carefully. "But that's his to carry. It's not yours. My only job is to make sure you're happy and safe. Are you happy here, Leo?" He thought for a moment, then a wide grin spread across his face. "Yeah. Me and Sam finished the rocket ship. Mr. Rossi gave us biscotti for space snacks." She kissed his forehead. "I love you to the moon and back," she whispered. As she walked back into the living room, the faint smell of yeast from the bakery below reminded her of how much their life had changed. It wasn't easy, but it was real. And it was theirs. She had all but forgotten the old leather ledger on Richard's bookshelf, the one with the bird on its spine. It was a relic from a past she had successfully escaped. She had no idea that back in the silent marble mansion, a series of events had been set in motion that would bring that book and all its secrets hurtling back into her life. Back in the sterile, soundproofed silence of his mansion, Richard barely registered his lawyer's call. The news that Eleanor had not only rejected his offer, but had returned the settlement papers physically torn to shreds, was delivered with a tone of cautious alarm. Richard, however, felt only a flicker of irritation, not genuine concern. He pictured her in a cramped, poorly lit room, ripping the pages with a theatrical flourish. It was, to him, a pathetic and childish tantrum, further proof of her inability to function in the real world, a world governed by logic, leverage, and transactions, not messy, inconvenient emotions. He dismissed the thought and turned his attention back to a far more pressing matter. A storm was brewing on his pristine financial horizon. A routine audit, initiated by a new, unexpectedly aggressive regulatory body, had flagged a series of offshore accounts. It was nothing he hadn't navigated before, a simple matter of creative accounting and well-placed influence. But this time was different. The lead auditor was a tenacious, unnervingly sharp woman named Clark, who couldn't be charmed, intimidated, or bought. His partners, men who typically communicated in coded pleasantries, were getting nervous. Their polite inquiries now carried a distinct, sharp edge of anxiety. They needed documentation, reassurances, definitive proof that everything was, as Richard had always promised, unimpeachable. That proof, the ultimate key to both his success and his potential ruin, was in his grandfather's ledger. It had never been a sentimental keepsake for him. It was a tool. His grandfather, a bookkeeper with a larcenous mind, had devised a brilliant, simple, and utterly untraceable system of double-entry bookkeeping. One set of books, the official one, was for the taxman and the public. The other, the real one, was recorded in an old-fashioned leather-bound ledger with a faded gold bird etched on its spine. Richard had inherited, adapted, and perfected the system. The ledger wasn't just a record of his legitimate family wealth. It was a meticulous, handwritten chronicle of every illicit transaction, every hidden asset, every illegal shortcut he had taken to build his empire. It was the only thing in the world that could unravel it all. He strode into his office, the very picture of calm authority, and went to the vast floor-to-ceiling bookshelf. His fingers, steady and sure, traced the leather-bound spines. Moby Dick, Global Economics. The space between them was empty. He stopped. His heart gave a single hard jolt. His gaze swept the shelf again, then the next, then the one below. A cold, tight knot began to form in his stomach. He started pulling the books off the shelf, his movements at first controlled, then becoming frantic. The perfect, curated order of his library, a source of immense pride, was disturbed for the first time in years. Spines cracked, dust motes danced in the slivers of afternoon light. The ledger was gone. His mind, usually a seamless engine of logic, raced and sputtered, discarding and grasping for possibilities. The cleaners? No. They were under ironclad instructions never to touch anything in his office. A partner? Impossible. They wouldn't dare, and they didn't know where to look. Then the image surfaced, clear and damning. Eleanor, in the moments before she left, her eyes lingering on that very bookshelf. He remembered her strange affinity for that specific book, how she would sometimes take it down when she thought he wasn't looking, her fingers tracing the bird on the cover. He had found one of her pressed flowers inside it once, a purple pansy, and had coolly chastised her for being sentimental. Of course, the realization didn't wash over him in a wave. It hit him with a sharp, cold stab of ice. She had taken it. The useless, emotional woman he had discarded had, in her foolish, aimless sentimentality, stumbled upon the one thing that could destroy him. Her rejection of the settlement money wasn't a tantrum. It was a strategy. This was her weapon. Blackmail. Revenge. The little fool was trying to play his game. The cold knot in his stomach ignited into a blaze of white-hot fury. He grabbed his car keys, his meticulously controlled world collapsing into a single burning point of focus, getting that book back. The sight of his gleaming black Mercedes slicing through the noisy, vibrant streets of Eleanor's new neighborhood was a jarring intrusion of one world upon another. He parked in front of the bakery, his $1,000 suit and polished Italian shoes feeling alien on the cracked, uneven pavement. The mingled smell of garlic, yeast, and burnt sugar was cloying, offensive to his senses. He found her apartment number scrawled on a dented mailbox and took the narrow, rickety stairs 2 at a time, his anger building with every echoing footstep. He didn't knock. He slammed the flimsy door open with the flat of his hand. Eleanor was on the floor with Leo and Sam, surrounded by a chaotic city of Lego bricks. They were laughing, mid-construction of an elaborate castle. She looked up, her smile dissolving into a mask of shock and fear. Leo, startled by the crash, scrambled behind her, his eyes wide and terrified. "Richard, what are you doing?" "Cut the innocent act, Eleanor," he snarled, his voice a low, dangerous growl that made the cheap wine glasses on a nearby shelf rattle. He took in the tiny, cluttered apartment, his lip curled in disgust. "So this is your master plan? This hovel? A life of squalor and secondhand furniture all just to spite me? Get out," she said, her voice trembling but firm. She scrambled to her feet, instinctively positioning herself in front of the children. "I'm not leaving without it," he said, taking a step closer, invading the small space. "Give it to me." "Give you what? I have nothing of yours." "The book," he hissed, his patience gone, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "The ledger. My grandfather's ledger, the one you stole from my office." Eleanor stared at him, her brow furrowed in genuine, absolute confusion. The old book with the bird on the spine? The one she used for pressing flowers? For a wild moment, she thought he had finally lost his mind. "The ledger? Richard, I didn't take that. Why on earth would I take that?" Her transparent confusion only enraged him further. He saw it as a clumsy, insulting attempt at acting. "Stop playing these pathetic games. You rejected my offer. You left pretending to be some kind of martyr, all while holding the one thing you knew could hurt me. It's a clever little scheme, I'll admit. So tell me, what's the price? How much will it take to get it back?" And then, in the cold, desperate fury of his eyes, she understood. The book wasn't just a keepsake. His panic, his rage. It wasn't about a sentimental object. It was about something else entirely. The faded etching of the bird, the thick, mostly empty pages. It was a secret. A secret big enough to make this powerful, controlled man barge into her home and completely unravel before her eyes. The world for a moment tilted on its axis. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice steadier now. And for the very first time since she'd met him, she felt a sliver of power. "I left that book on the shelf, right where it always was." He didn't believe her for a second. He saw her denial as the opening move in a negotiation. He took another step, his shadow falling over her and the children huddled behind her. "I will not let you ruin me, Eleanor. Do you understand? I will not let a sentimental fool who presses flowers and books tear down everything I have built. Find the book. Or I swear to you, this charming new life you've made for yourself will fall apart so fast you won't even know what hit you. I will take your son, I will take your job, and I will take this pathetic little roof from over your head. You have 24 hours. He turned and strode out, slamming the door behind him, leaving a wake of terror and confusion. Eleanor stood frozen, her heart pounding against her ribs. She had walked away from Richard's world, wanting nothing from it. But now, it seemed, a piece of that world, a piece whose value she never knew, had followed her, and it was set to destroy her, whether she had it or not. The slam of the door was a physical blow, a shockwave that rattled the cheap wine glasses on the shelf and Eleanor's very bones. For a long moment, the only sound in the apartment was the ragged, terrified sob of the baker's son. It was that sound, the sound of a frightened child, that broke through the icy paralysis gripping Eleanor's heart. She knelt, her limbs feeling heavy and disconnected, and pulled both Leo and a trembling Sam into a fierce, protective hug. "It's okay," she murmured, the words feeling like lies in her own mouth. "He's gone. It was just a man with a loud voice. It's all okay now." After she had taken a tearful Sam downstairs to his father, offering a weak, flustered apology about a family disagreement, she returned to the sanctuary of her apartment and slid the deadbolt and chain into place. The flimsy metal felt utterly inadequate, like holding a twig against a tidal wave. Richard's threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. 24 hours. Then a frantic, desperate energy seized her. He had been so certain, so consumed with a rage that bordered on madness. What if I'm wrong? The thought whispered. What if I did pack it by accident? She began to tear her tiny home apart. The life she had so carefully and lovingly assembled was dismantled in a desperate search for a relic of the life she'd escaped. She emptied the crate bookshelves, shaking each volume. Austen, Dickens, a well-worn collection of poetry, as if the heavy leather ledger might magically fall from between their pages. She pulled out every piece of clothing from her small closet, ran her hands through the box of Leo's winter clothes, dug through the box of keepsakes that held her mother's paintbrushes, and a handful of faded photographs. The search grew more hopeless with every empty drawer, every clear space under the bed. Her new life was defined by its simplicity, its lack of excess. There was nowhere for a secret of that magnitude to hide. She finally sank to the floor in the middle of the living room, surrounded by the chaotic evidence of her panic. He was going to destroy it all. He would take Leo, take her job, take this small, sunlit apartment, and it would be for nothing. For a ghost, for a book she didn't even have. Leo, who had been watching her frantic search with wide, silent eyes, padded over to her. He sat down beside the pile of books and Lego bricks, his small hand patting her arm with a solemn gravity. "Are you looking for a book, Mom?" She couldn't speak. She just nodded, her throat tight with a despair so complete it felt like a physical weight on her chest. "A brown one?" he asked, his voice soft. "With a gold bird?" Eleanor's head snapped up. The air rushed from her lungs. A terrible, cold dread washed over her. What did you say, Leo?" "The bird book," he repeated, his innocence a stark contrast to the storm raging inside her. "The one you liked. The one you put the flowers in. I brought it for you, so you wouldn't be sad." For a moment, the world tilted. He hadn't been stealing. He hadn't been hiding anything. He had seen her touching the book, had seen the small, pressed flower she'd once left inside it. In his simple, profound, and devastating love for her, he had packed it. He thought he was bringing her a treasure from a sad place. "Leo," she whispered, her voice hoarse and unrecognizable. "Sweetheart, where is it? Where's the book?" He stood up, his small face serious, and walked to the corner of the room. He knelt before the large cardboard box they had painted silver, the rocket ship, their vessel for imaginary trips to the moon. He reached inside, past a collection of smooth stones, his worn teddy bear, and the half-eaten bag of space snack biscotti from Mr. Rossi. From the very bottom, he pulled out a dark, heavy leather ledger with a faded gold leaf bird etched on its spine. He held it out to her with both hands, an offering. "For our new house," he said, his voice bright with pride. "So you can press new flowers here." Eleanor took the book. Its weight in her hands felt immense, world-altering. This object, a thing she associated with quiet afternoons and pressed pansies, was Richard's entire world, and her son, in a pure act of love, had placed it directly in her path. Richard's final threat echoed in her mind, more terrifying than ever. "I will take your son." The irony was exquisitely cruel. The very thing that could ruin him brought to her by the one person he threatened to take away. She held the ledger to her chest, her mind a maelstrom. The path of least resistance was clear. Call Richard. Tell him she had it. He would come, take it, and leave them alone. She could trade the book for peace, but it would be a fragile peace, a temporary truce. She would live forever looking over her shoulder, knowing he could change the terms at any moment. She would be letting him win. She would be teaching her son that bullies get what they want if you just give in. Then she looked at Leo, at his trusting face, at the small boy who was loud and messy and gloriously happy because he was free. She thought of her mother, who had lived a life rich in color and love, not in currency. Signing the settlement would have been selling her silence. Returning this book would be selling her soul. Her decision, when it came, felt as clean and final as the tearing of the pages. It was the most terrifying choice of her life, and the only one she could possibly make. She walked to the kitchen, the heavy book in one hand. She didn't look up Richard's number. She looked up the main switchboard for the Federal Financial Regulatory Agency. Her hand trembled as she dialed, but her voice, when she spoke, was clear and steady. She asked for the name of the lead auditor on the Vance Capital case, Clark. A moment later, a sharp, no-nonsense voice answered on the second ring. Clark speaking. Eleanor took a deep breath. The faint, comforting smell of yeast and sugar from the bakery below drifted through the open window, a reminder of the real, tangible world she was fighting for. "My name is Eleanor Vance," she said. "I believe I have something that belongs to you." The fallout was not merely a scandal. It was a detonation. The Vance Ledger, as the press gleefully dubbed it, was the key that unlocked a decade of hidden accounts, illegal trades, and systematic corruption. Richard's empire, built on a foundation of brilliant lies, crumbled with breathtaking speed. His partners, once men of untouchable power, turned on him to save themselves. The man who had once graced the covers of business magazines became a front-page cautionary tale, his name synonymous with epic greed and spectacular ruin. Eleanor gave one confidential, videotaped deposition. She laid out the facts simply and answered every question truthfully. She asked for nothing in return, no reward, no settlement, no immunity. Her only request was to be left completely and utterly alone. Months later, on a quiet Tuesday evening, life in the little apartment above the bakery continued its gentle rhythm. The frantic terror of that afternoon felt like a story that had happened to someone else. Eleanor sat on the floral sofa, the warm glow of a second-hand lamp illuminating the pages of a book. Leo was curled beside her, his head on her lap, fast asleep, his breathing soft and even. The cardboard rocket ship was still in the corner, now filled with new treasures from the park and drawings of alien landscapes. This was her world. She had not inherited it. She had built it from scratch. It wasn't a gilded cage, but a small, messy, and infinitely precious nest. When she had walked out of Richard's marble mansion, she thought she was leaving with nothing. But holding her sleeping son, the scent of baking bread in the air, she knew she had ended up with everything.